Hi, I'm Lisa Melandri, Executive Director at the Contemporary Art Museum, St. Louis, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's Friday. As our COVID precautions continue, we've decided to make all our First Fridays virtual events. And each First Friday will celebrate and focus on one of the wonderful artists who are on view at CAM right now. We're going to kick this off with a focus on Kahlil Robert Irving, whose great exhibition At Dusk is on view at CAM right now, part of the Great Rivers Biennial. And I would very much like to thank the Gateway Foundation for their partnership in making the GRB happen every 2 years and really bringing the incredible talents of the St. Louis artistic community to the fore. Later tonight, you will hear Kahlil in conversation with Misa Jeffries, Assistant Curator, and you too will have a chance to join them in dialogue. But first, I would like to be able to introduce you to CJ Mitchell, our Community Access Coordinator, who's going to take us through a 10-minute hands-on workshop on redesigning the American flag, something that features heavily in At Dusk, Kahlil's exhibition. So throughout tonight's program, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. And our Director of Learning and Engagement, Michelle December, will be keeping an eye on that and be able to answer any inquiries that you may have. So with that, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending time with us, and also for spending time with Kahlil and getting to know his exhibition and his artwork better. We are delighted to have you join us. Take care and enjoy.
The first slide we're looking at is Many Scenes, which is a black on black flag with embroidery. It was made in 2020. We see some familiarity with the American flag with the red and white stripes, but in this flag, the stripes are gray and black. Good evening, everyone. I'm CJ Mitchell, and I am the Community Access Coordinator at CAM, and I want to welcome you to our First Friday art activity, which is called Redesigning the American Flag, and it is inspired by Kahlil Robert Irving, one of the artists featured in the Great River Biennial, which is on exhibition currently at CAM. I'd like to present to you some of his flags that inspired this project, and so let's begin. Our second slide is the first slide we're looking at is Many Scenes, which is a black on black flag with embroidery. It was made in 2020. We see some familiarity with the American flag with the red and white stripes, but in this flag, the stripes are gray and black. Our second slide is of a flag called Seen or Be Seen. It is a white and gray flag with white embroidery, which was done in 2020. It again has white and gray stripes, similar to the previous slide that we just looked at with the mini scenes. And this third slide we're looking at is of a flag titled Many Men, Many, 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 Many Men Wish Death Upon Me, which was part of an exhibition on Old Glory, and it is a black on black flag with stars. It was on exhibition at the RISD Museum from 2017 to 2018. This current slide is of the flag titled, Lord, I Don't Cry No More, Look to the Sky No More, which is a white flag with black stars and black stripes. This was created in 2017. It is part of a trio of flags that are in the RISD Museum's collection. In this slide, we see an image of the flag that I created when I was thinking about the project of redesigning the American flag. So I decided to use printed paper of kente cloth to reflect my background and my heritage of being an African American. And so this is my creation of what I thought of as I redesigned the American flag. The colors in a flag have significance. And so in this slide, I wanted to give you some background or some ideas about characteristics and virtues associated with different colors. So as you can see, I have red and yellow, the basic colors, and black and brown that you can look at. And this may help you in deciding which colors have meaning for you as you redesign your flag. All right, we are now in my final slide of my presentation, and I'm going to leave you with this question on how will you redesign the flag? I want you to keep in mind, are there colors that have significance to you? What symbols would you incorporate into your American flag? And how do you want to incorporate your experience as an American in your flag? There are templates to choose from in which you can decide how creative you want to get with your flag. And next, we will start the art activity part and have fun.
I decided to use a traditional template of the flag for my design, my redesign of the American flag. You have a couple of choices. Some of the other flags just have less detail, so you can add your own flair and design to how you want to redesign the American flag. I am using colored pencils and I am coloring in the stripes. I decided on colored pencils because I like them for their texture, just a different medium to use. You can use any medium. You could use crayons or markers. I think also with the colored pencils, I'm going to be using printed paper. So, and gluing it down. So sometimes if you use markers, it may run a little bit. And so just keep that in mind. You can still use markers and glue and printed paper if you want to. Just be careful. Because sometimes it bleeds a little bit and it will bleed your color. So deciding on what colors you want to use, thinking about what colors have significance for you. As I described in the slide show, you can decide what colors you would like to use or keep them traditional. It's up to you. Right now I am coloring in the area behind the stars. It's a little tedious process because I don't want to color the stars in yet. So coloring all that section in without coloring the stars in takes a little bit of time. And now, after I finish that, I'm going to be using my printed paper. And I'm going to use it, I'm going to line it up and put indicator marks on the back so I know how long or how wide the stripes should be. And then I'll use a ruler for a straight line so it makes it easier to cut. And then once I have them cut out, I will begin to glue them down. The paper was not long enough, or not as long as the flag, so I'm leaving no glue on the end so I can come back and add strips so that the print goes all the way to the end of the flag. And that's what I'm doing there. And then after I have all that glued down, I pick out colors that maybe accentuate the paper I chose. And I'm coloring in my stars. And after I color in my stars, I went back in and added a little bit more color in areas that were light. And then I'm going to cut my flag out. And now I have my redesigned American flag.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into our program this afternoon. I'm Misa Jeffries. I'm Assistant Curator at CAM, and shortly I'll be joined by Kahlil Robert Irving, one of the winners of the Great Rivers Biennial, and he's our featured artist for this First Friday event. Kahlil and I are going to have a conversation about his exhibition on view at CAM, and after about 20 minutes or so, we will open it up to questions from you all. So please use the Q&A function to type in your questions, and we'll do our best to get to all of them before we wrap up at 5. So to get us started, I wanted to share a video walkthrough of Kahlil's exhibition in case you haven't had a chance to see it. So let me start that now.
I mean, but can we say how amazing that flag was? Man, that flag was good.
So good. So I'm going to do a little bit of your bio, Kahlil, first before we start our conversation. I thought I would just sort of talk over the video while people were watching, getting a sense of the space.
Can we move the cursor so the drive, the file link or the web address can go off the screen?
Yes. So gone?
Still there, but.
So Kahlil,
video.
Yeah. Kahlil received his BFA from the Kansas City Art Institute in 2015 and his MFA from Washington University in St. Louis in 2017. Kahlil presented his first institutional solo exhibition at Wesleyan University's Center for the Arts in 2018. And in 2019, he participated in the Singapore Biennial and in an exhibition at the Whitney Museum of American Art, which recently acquired his work for the permanent collection. His work is also in the collections of the Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh and the Nerman Museum of Contemporary Art in Kansas. Last week, he was named one of the 23 breakout artists on the Artsy Vanguard 2020 list, which is an annual list of the most promising artists shaping the future of contemporary art. So just to give a little bit of context to Kahlil's exhibition at CAM, it is part of the Great Rivers Biennial Arts Awards program. Kahlil was selected by a set of jurors from an open call for submissions, and he and 2 other artists from St. Louis each received a $20,000 honorarium and a solo show at CAM, which is what we're seeing here. So I can just let this kind of play out for a little bit longer before we jump to the PowerPoint.
There's my mom.
Okay, let's take a look at some install shots. And Kahlil, I first of all wanted to say thank you so much for sharing with us today. We're excited to hear from you. I'm excited to hear about your reflections on the exhibition now that it's been open for about 2.5 weeks. I wanted to just start, I guess, at the beginning. I wanted you to talk about the title of your exhibition, At Dusk. Can you tell us why you named your show that?
I'm always interested in time. Either time of your experience of walking through a show or a time which I'm, that something may occur in the day or some conflation between the two, or what may or what could be occurring at a certain moment during the day. So from one moment to another, it's a liminal space in one's experience. And so at dusk, there are certain things that happen at dusk, and there's this thing that people say, what's done in the dark comes to the light. Well, at dusk means things are about to be, it's about to become nighttime. So things that might happen in the night or things may happen in that transition from the heat of the day to the cool of the night. So I thought At Dusk was a great moment or a great use of vocabulary as a means to kind of talk about this transition one is about to experience while walking through the museum. But it's also like, I don't know, there's a previous work that I made called Before and After Sundown, Town. And I think about that work a lot. And this installation has the sky collage above it. So that's a date. That's actually like midday sky, but I don't know, something about that reference to the evening is pretty great. A lot of the images in the wall collage are from the evening or nighttime.
Mhm. Thinking about kind of setting the tone, I guess, I wanted to first start with the first thing that you really see when you turn that corner walking down the stairs, the two flags that are hung, the two American flags. This is a better view of it here. You can see both of them. There's one upside down and one right side up, hung on the same post. I wanted you to just sort of talk through that, especially since CJ focused on your flag designs in your larger practice. Can you tell us about why you chose to hang the flags in this kind of configuration and in this particular spot?
Well, there are multiple experiences happening in the States right now and all the territories where there's one perspective that's like a normative way of living or expectation of how to exist. And then there's another one that's like kind of an alternate reality of sorts. And I don't know, I kind of think of The Manchurian Candidate, the movie from the 90s with Denzel Washington, where he's like telling everybody like something's wrong, something's wrong, and no one's listening to him, no one takes him serious, but he still has the bugs in his head that force him to possibly do something bad at the end of the movie. And in a way, these two flags turned against each other as a kind of manifestation of that double experience, or that those two parallel experiences, one going right side up, one going the opposite direction. But one flag upside down is a flag in distress. And so it's like not only two experiences, but it could also just be some people who think everything's fine, but another collection of people are in distress. So
that leads me to wonder a little bit about the flag that's hanging in the window as well, which is kind of double hung. Can you talk about the significance of each side of it? It's kind of hard to see the opposite side, but it's
well, it's two flags. There's two flags on one pole. One flag is a white on white striped flag with chain link fence pattern. And then the other side is a Blue Lives Memorial flag. And I decided to put these two flags together because when I made my first white on white striped flag, I called it Have Mercy on Me. And it's the third sequence of a 50 Cent's lyric in the chorus of his song Many Men. And it's Have Mercy on Me. And, you know, I come from a mixed parentage, and some of my family believe that voting for Trump and having this kind of like certain ideological perspective and living here in the States is okay. And I thought like, well, maybe I could make this flag and have it in this dialogue where maybe white folks will start saying, have mercy on me for all of the bad things that they believe in and choose to do that affect other people's lives. And this Blue Lives Support flag behind the white on white chain link fence is just like a gesture of kind of like figuring out how to put these things closer and in proximity, but also thinking about the materiality of the nylon or whatever these polyester that these flags are made out of. They capture the light so well. So it's almost like making one flag with two flags, but it's only really activated because of light's permeation of the material, which creates this beautiful luminosity and actually exposes a lot of the things that may be hidden within the work, even if it's a white on white striped flag. So it's kind of special, but also complicated for personal and more social reasons.
I kind of hopped over this image, but there are 5 flags that are mounted pretty high up in this space. You see them actually when you're approaching the exhibition from the entrance. Did you want to talk about these flags as well?
Well, they're about location. there's like kind of like a physical location and like kind of statehood that's present. There's a kind of city, there's the city that's present, St. Louis, we're in St. Louis. And then there's this like undertone of like libertarian, racist, white supremacist ideology that comes from the 19th century, kind of in the middle, kind of the body of it all. And this binary flag at the end that just like kind of like, just like, it's like a constant, it's like a stillness, but also a movement present between all of the different meanings of these flags together. The flag works together are one piece in the show, and it's called, what is it called? Flag Combine?
Flag Combine, yeah.
Something like that. And so I see all of these flags as one work just dispersed through the gallery. So a lot of them are found and purchased, but then some of them are made or designed by me and then made. And so I use these as a way to just create gesture in the gallery that gave me room to explore something new that I hadn't done before.
Yeah.
So creating new associations out of actual objects, whereas the wallpaper is making associations in a more kind of permanent way, where these artifacts or these flags can be dispersed and never be associated in relationship to each other again.
Yeah. Yeah. What I really like about your show at CAM is that there's so many different bodies of work in it, and, you know, older works, by older, I mean a couple years older, but I like that you experimented in different mediums. And as we go through the slideshow, we'll see at the very end, we'll get to a light box, but I wanted to shift gears a little bit and do talk about the vinyl wallpaper, since that's a kind of newer trajectory in your practice. The wallpaper itself, both of them, the strip of sky above and the collage imagery below, take up a lot of space in a gallery. It's 66 linear feet going across 2 walls. And so I wanted you to talk about the process of making this work. I'm personally interested to know how you started to approach making such a large work. I know that you worked in panels, but how did you organize these thousands of images and be able to, you know, organize them and categorize them? Do you have like systems for how you do that? I'd love for you to talk about the process a little bit.
Well, I've been making collages since 2013, so they're not so new. Everybody kind of like focuses on me making these ceramic sculptures, but I've actually made a lot of different kind of stuff. I've just only had opportunities to only show ceramic work. So having the opportunity to start, like in my show at Wesleyan University, I got to show more, like I had the opportunity to show everything that I was interested in. And so this whole installation, I kind of put underneath a series of work that I've been working on since 2011 called Street Views. And so like, even though these are from different times, this installation is one piece and is a part of that series. And the wallpaper was born out of making collages to make decal sheets for the image transfers on the sculptures. And at one point I just decided where I would just combine the decal patterns together and make digital prints that I could maybe sell for cheaper. Since my sculptures are so expensive, maybe I could make a little bit more money by selling prints. That ain't worked so well. I ain't sold many prints. So I was like, well, fuck it. What if I use the architecture of the museum at the scale to which I could translate more information a bit faster? And so my catalog is just kind of by time, like by year. I catalog everything by year. And right now I'm cataloging everything by season. So most of the things that are in this collage were cataloged and collected this spring. I use sometimes everything that I've collected up to a certain point. And then when like this wet wagon wheels, this piece is like kind of stopped a certain sequence of collection. And so I started fall 2020, not too long ago, to start collecting more stuff. I got my scanner right here next to my computer. I have a stack of found objects here that I'm waiting to scan. And I've been collecting certain things. I've even collected some images from this very talk. To where those will be worked into future collages in the future. I mean, a lot of it also comes from like talking to I've been talking a lot to my grandmother lately, and she's been telling me things, and just like all of the ways that you are affected by information on a day-to-day basis is kind of what these are all about. It's not necessarily just about me or my interests or any specific narrative, but there's a layering of associations and a really great word that I just learned reading an Opion Wazer text by Glenn Ligon, or about Glenn's work, is a disassociation. And it's interesting to like be putting these things together, be telling a very specific or communicating a very specific set of information, but then also like turning it around and allowing certain information to be accessible, or commenting on certain things in a certain way that only certain people could understand. And Oakley's a reference that I found to what Oakley was saying was like a bodybuilding magazines in the 20th century. You know, bodybuilding magazines were these ones that I was finding were specifically about queer gay men interest in bodybuilding and like images of the male body, but then the population who was necessarily buying those things weren't necessarily looking at them for the sexual factor that's a part of the iconography. And so, you know, people aren't necessarily looking through these collages, understanding the Black experience through them, or the colonial historical narrative that kind of is underpinned through it all. Or they may see some critique, but they don't really understand the context of said critique. So it's really interesting to have things in these collages that are very specific for certain people, and then certain things that will just pass over people's heads. But there's a lot for everybody in them, and they've constantly expanded. I mean, some of them are more simple, and some of them are way more complex.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's dealing with such a heavy and widespread topic, you know, thinking about institutionalized racism, systemic racism in the US. And I think what is very successful with the work is your use of humor. And you've talked about this as well. Humor to kind of bring people in. There's a lot of memes, a lot of jokes in it it kind of breaks down your barrier, and then you can enter into the work in a way. So do you want to say anything about how you use humor to kind of provide an access point for people? Does that take away from the kind of gravity of the work, or is that a kind of trope that you use to, you know, get people in, get people less guarded?
I don't know, because I'm not talking to people after they see it. So, you know, I don't know. I'm not necessarily trying to use any of these things as a tool for people to, I just know that if I have a relationship with a certain thing, I know people who look like me might have a similar relationship to that thing. And I know people who don't necessarily look like me and have the same life experience won't necessarily understand it in the same way. So I just kind of just put it up there. I don't really think about it in that way. I to be honest, in a lot of ways, I don't really care what people think about it, because it's just like people don't care about how when they swiping through Instagram. It's just as meaningless. They walk through the museum and they see it here because they see it in the museum, so it's something worth looking at. But after that, I don't know. I don't really care what, you know, in a lot of ways it is what it is. So I'm open, I'm free. I mean, it's my life, it's my catalog, it's all the things that I'm coming in contact with, just kind of reorganized in a way. So there's a fishing between experiences that I can't control, and I don't want to have the responsibility to try to control that or direct people in any certain way. Even though it looks like I am, it's only because it's through my lens that you're seeing it in a way. Not necessarily that I'm collecting these things exactly for this reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, the humor is for relief for Black folks. It ain't for anybody else, to be honest. Most of the jokes nobody would really understand, because if you laugh at some of the issues that are being presented in this, and you're white, you laughing because you know that you're complicit. See, that's what the humor, like if we really want to talk about humor in the work, the humor is for the people who actually can empathize what's going on, or like know that that's their experience. But for white people laughing at this shit, it's not funny. It shouldn't be funny for white people looking at most of my work, because then you would realize that you are part of a system that continues to perform this very specific violent act that is giving certain people's experience an oppressive lens. So that's how I think about the humor.
Let's shift gears a little bit. I just wanted to talk about the relationship between the two vinyl prints and the way that you decided to hang them. I mean, there's a certain density and kind of weight to the imagery that we're seeing below versus the lightness and the airiness of the sky above, especially with that sort of gap that's in between. It's almost like this pause in between the two moments. Mm-hmm. Tell us about why you chose to install the works in this way. What was your intention there?
Well, the scale, the bottom collage, the wet wagon wheels, this work is at the scale in which we would operate with our cell phones. You know, it's at the same level of our cell phones, our computers, or our own personal physicality. I mean, I know a lot of people who are 6 feet, but I don't know many people who are over 6 feet. And so within this realm of the reach of our hands is kind of like that. Is the wet wagon wheels section, and the sky is just this fake sky that's kind of above us, parenthetically to our day-to-day experience of kind of operating in life. But here it's a kind of fractured perspective or experience in a different landscape. So just kind of mirroring the outside world inside the museum in a kind of theatrical sense.
Nice. Well, I wanted to shift gears and talk a little bit about your sculptures.
That pizza's so sweet.
And I know you've talked about them a lot, but for anyone that's on the call that has not heard you speak about your sculptural practice, which you're probably best known for, I think it would be really important to sort of talk through maybe the process of how you make these works. I think it would be interesting for people to know, about the inclusion of these decals that you mentioned earlier, or this sort of facsimiles of the everyday objects, like, things that you find on the side of the street, at the thrift store, on the floor of your studio space. Can you just sort of talk about what we're seeing here and what your process is for making these works and the inclusion of those objects?
Some of them the first ones were made out of cardboard boxes. And now I kind of make them out of a constructed plaster system. Most of them are made from reclaim or casting slip. But I don't know, this piece, some of them are born out of a very personal experience and telling a semi-autobiographical like narrative, but then some of them are not. But then, in a lot of ways, it's like there's this double presence within all of my work. There's multiple associations that are always present and possibly able to be viewed or seen. And I don't know, I kind of am the only one necessarily who can see them all at the same time. But I think there are some people who can see them at the same time. The works are made out of, like here you see like some white clay slabs that make up the corner of the work. You see a cone pack, which is a kind of small technology that holds these pyrometric cones that melt at certain temperatures in the kiln after it reaches a certain temperature through a certain duration of time. And then I put opalescent luster on top of it to look like it's oil spill. This work is entitled Downtown Norfolk, Nebraska, 1998 from 2017. This one I think was made in a cardboard box. I make the box and then I put the things inside it and then I cut the box away after there's some structural integrity with the object. And then it's fired one time and then I apply glaze and then I fire it again. And then after it's fired at 2,360 some odd degrees, the overglaze enamel is placed. So you have colored enamel that's like a powder. You have luster, metallic lusters or metallic enamels that give the reflective and kind of opalescent surfaces. And then you have the digitally printed enamel decals, which are a most contemporary example of a kind of industrial technique that has been used in ceramics for about 200, 300 some odd years. And I think that there's a gap between the understanding of ceramics application in contemporary life. And so I'm just interested in kind of like bridging this gap. In my education, I learned about American studio pottery a lot. That is an appropriative history of Asian ceramics. And you don't really learn much about the industrial production. And so these sculptures are evolving in a place or coming from a place where it kind of makes comment on all of those things at the same time. And what's the gap between American studio pottery and today? And then if there was multiple lines of communication around ceramics, what would be the industrial evolution, like from 1750? What does ceramic history look like from 1750 to 2020, only on the industrial side? And is there any way to close a gap between people's understanding and education between American studio pottery and industry and today? And so in these works, I'm kind of collapsing time simultaneously in them to have all that present.
Mm-hmm. Within a lot of these sculptures, there's kind of references to different narratives around class and privilege. I'd be interested to hear you speak. So you were talking about like the kind of international aspect to, you know, porcelain production and ceramics. I'd be curious to hear you speak about your own kind of personal experiences, like how your experiences in St. Louis have impacted your works. Like you've talked about, you know, traversing the streets of St. Louis and thinking about racial injustices and segregation. Can you talk about how your own experience finds its way into these sculptures and affects your work?
That's a little bit difficult because it's like they are becoming otherworldly, you know, in a way they're in a new space, or I'm in a different space when thinking about what's being made and what's being shared and what's being shown. So if you stop here at this one, I don't remember this one's title because I made a title for it for the show because it was going to be in the show, and I didn't want it to be untitled but I just think of it as a thing. Like I think of it as a work. I don't necessarily think of it as a exhibition object or something that's going to live anywhere but with me. And so you have this reference to the arch here. Then you have this hexagonal slipcast jar on the left that has like 6 different sets of decals on it. And in St. Louis, you have all these different brick buildings that were built in all these different periods of time that are close to each other. But the application of the patterning and decorative ornament on different ones are very different because they were made at different times. Like the building that I'm in right now is built in 1921, and the building next to me, now on the corner, like directly next to me, is built in 1908. So there's 13 years difference between my building and the building next to me. And so what in the culture is different between these two buildings that make them look so different? And so in the work, there's like a way to talk about a very present right now, but there's also a way to kind of go through my own personal timeline and a kind of regional or environmental timeline. And on the flat surface of that plane that you're seeing where it's reflecting the gold, there's a set of images of cigarette butts crossing that plane of the sculpture. And on the planes of the edges of the sculpture, there are images of the protests from when Jason Stokely was acquitted 3 years ago. And so like you find cigarette, like I sweep my front area, like my sidewalk, every Saturday, and I find so many cigarette butts. But in my neighborhood, I'm not necessarily seeing so much protest, but I do see people interacting in a more kind of jovial way, but in the work, it's, the cigarettes are on the plane, and then the images of people, but where would this work emerge from? It kind of like emerges from nowhere, but calls to kind of like a decay and decadence at the same time, which I'm kind of interested in. So there's a decay in St. Louis where white folks have just consistently poured money into certain places, but continue to ignore other places. And I think there's that push and pull present within the work, and that kind of social structure is how St. Louis and my experience in the city come into the work in a specific way.
Yeah. Well, this is a different kind of push and pull, but I wanted to focus on Star Wars Street Wars, which is such a beautiful piece. For me, there's this kind of macro, micro thing going on. It looks like outer space, but it looks like the street at the same time. I think you were kind of going for the look of asphalt here. I wanted you to talk a little bit about this piece, not only in reference to the street, but also I believe you're referencing Antioch mosaics here as well. I would love for you to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, they don't, like I'm thinking about them in the studio, and I think about them when making, there's not like necessarily a direct reference, because these aren't mosaic. And I'm like trying to battle that with myself. Like, how can I reference something without it actually physically even having any physical connection or relationship to its reference? But I don't care. I still do it anyway. But Star Wars Street Wars it's one of 3 works that were made last year. And it's kind of actually building off of a premise that I kind of constructed when I was an undergrad. And my faculty member, she told me, she was like, "What are you talking about? You don't really know what you're doing." And I think about the plane of the earth as as something that we kind of penetrate into. There's a plane in which we operate on, and then we build off of the plane up into space. And so this work is made out of 49 ceramic hand-pressed tiles. And there's like little bits of white clay that make the speckling that you see that reference starbursts in space. But also those white specks are a reference to the asphalt on the street. And in Antioch, Turkey in 5 AD, they told political narratives in mosaics, but also secular narratives and religious narratives. I saw them at the Baltimore Museum of Art in 2017. I was there I was a judge for the NAACP AXO program, and I was just blown away that 2,000 some odd years ago, they were able to make images at this monumental scale that would be on the ceilings, walls, and floor spaces of public and private environments. And so I was like, well, maybe I could tell some of those narratives about contemporary life too in my work. So it took me about 2 years to get to a place where I could actually start investigating it. But I'm excited to see where this work is can be a kind of jumping springboard to what I do next in the studio. I mean, granted, I'm working right now on stuff, but this is one of the many avenues where I want to go.
I wanted to talk about the work on the right as well. You were mentioning Jason Stockley and his non-indictment. Just wanted to bring up this piece, which is called White Matter, White Text, and it looks at the Department of Justice report on the Ferguson Police Department following the shooting death of Michael Brown. It's a very St. Louis specific piece. There's a lot to say here. I would love for you to talk about how you made the work, the choice to use American Olean tiles specifically, but then also the way that you kind of layer the text here, I think is really powerful. And I would love for you to talk about the choices that you made with this work.
The white matter, white text, this is a second piece in like not a grouping, but it's just like a continuation of another work that I had done at a smaller scale. And I was doing a residency and I went to Lowe's Hardware to buy some materials, and I found these tiles and I was like, ooh, maybe I could use these tiles to make like cheaper work. That, I mean, a lot of it comes along being able to like get more work to more broader public in terms of value, like price. And so I was like, oh, I make these collages and I'll use these tiles and maybe I make some quick money. It ain't work that way. But Olean is a town in New York State that Olean is a town in New York State that's not too far from where I was doing the residency. And this major conglomerate bought the Olean factory and outsourced the production of the tile to Mexico. But it's still branded American Olean. I thought it was like kind of like antithesis of what the brand, like it's a conflict of interest. And so I was like, well, I'll put the violent acts of white people on these tiles as a means of kind of super like maximizing as much white problematic in one object as possible. And then the first work was born out of this, and then this work is now born with the tiles. And so I can't stop thinking about how so many white people think that when Michael Brown was murdered, that it was such like a life-changing experience for them. But it's like, for Black people, it's every day we hear about Black people being killed by white people and white people not caring. And so to put this new collage in the museum, kind of like a sight of a gun, and it's just like, or like a cross, it actually looks like these crosses that I have on my building. It's not really a cross, but it's like a very long horizontal with a very short perpendicular line at the middle of the horizontal line. But I also make the relationship between the surface of the tile or the plane of the tile to a plane of an iPad or a screen or computer screen or something like that. And so the quick layering of the text on each other is also a comment of the speed in which you toss your screen or you scroll through a screen to see information. And much like all my other work in the ceramic sculptures, they're all, a lot of people see them only as ceramic, but it's also photography. Like I'm also talking about the lens in which you see things, but also the lens at which things are visible or invisible, and things that are underneath. You know, what is underneath the action of you scrolling through your screen? There's still data, there's still time, and there's still energy embedded in those actions of moments passing. So the work is not just this work, but all the work is a lot about photography. And these are all things that are in motion. The ceramics, the tiles, the light box, the flags, the digital collage on the wall renders them all still. There's noise when you're moving. There's an action, but all this work is silent. Even though there's so much noise that comes along with every action that not only makes them up, but how one would experience them in time and space. So I'm more of a photographer than I am any ceramist, to be honest.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, just moving on to the last work as you make your way through the gallery, thinking about what a light box is. I mean, a light box is used to look at negatives, you know, as a photographer. So tell us how you got into that. I mean, it's clear that you consider yourself within that kind of practice, a photography practice. So was that a natural?
I mean, I do and I don't. I mean, I don't go out in the streets calling me no photographer. But,
No.
I mean, also don't go
No.
into the streets calling me a ceramist either, because I can't tell you necessarily how to make your glaze fit. I can help you make a pot, but I can't necessarily tell you how to make your glaze not craze on the outside. So
Sure. But I mean, there's a decision that you made to work within that kind of light box vocabulary here. Was it to animate the images? Was it to give it a kind of dimensionality? Talk about it in relationship to like the larger vinyl too.
Well, I mean, there was a big ass light box just a few years ago shown in the gallery next door where Ebony's piece is. So if there was a light box in the front room, I wanted to put a light box in my room. Kelly Walker showed a 4x7, 4x6 light box in his exhibition several years ago. So I wanted to use a reference to that with more pertinent and direct information
Sure.
to my show. But this work, so I'm just trying to figure out how to get, I slow down the collages and the images into the collages, and the light box is a means to get them, is an intermediary step between them getting active again. And so I want to make these collages interactive, but I'm not a tech wizard. So, excuse me, the light box is one way to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever, this is like totally random, but have you ever thought about making video then, if you're talking about kind of animating works?
Well, yeah, you know, it's funny. My friend William, shoot, what is William's last name? Bill Morris. He actually wrote me and asked me, why don't you turn this work into a video? It would look so good as a video. And then I'm like trying to think, who else do I know like collects a lot of found material and turns them into videos? Arthur Jaffa. And I was like, oof, I don't know how I want to like interact or be in relationship to Arthur Jaffa. I don't want someone to say, oh, Arthur Jaffa been making these video collage pieces, so now he want to make, I don't want to get into that conversation, because it's not just about the things in motion, it's them in motion in context and in relationship to each other.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well.
There's a question in the chat, and it says, can you talk about why the shooting of Michael Brown did become such a turning point for white people to see injustice, and why do you think it was that brought the awareness that woke America? To be honest, I don't know, because like you got 50 years ago, 70 years ago, Emmett Till was murdered and slaughtered, and that sure woke up a whole lot of people. But I think that there's always been, just like from my reading and my research and talking to my grandmother, and you know, I asked my grandmother, was it worse living through Jim Crow than it is living today? And she says it's worse living today than it was living in Jim Crow, because now white people just do whatever they want. It doesn't fucking matter.
Oh my God. Wow.
This is a 75-year-old woman talking about this experience, having worked as a nurse for 50 years, taking care of mostly white people's children in a neonatal intensive care unit, making white people's babies stay alive. I mean, she says that Barnes Jewish Hospital, Black people were forced into the basement, and that she will never go to Barnes because it's like a meat market and how they treat people that aren't, you know, it's just crazy. So I don't know why 2014 was such a reckoning because I think because so many people were just so fed up that so many people took to the streets, and it lasted so long that maybe that was why. But to be honest, I don't know. There's actually a group called Witnessing Whiteness, and it's a organization that actually previous GRB winner Sarah Paulson is a major part of, and artist who lives and works in St. Louis named Dana Kriz. She is also a part of it. And let me see if I can find a link and share it in the chat, and maybe that could be a way to help broaden that conversation. There's a book called Witnessing Whiteness, The Need to Talk About Race and How to Do It by Shelley Touchlook, which is one of the books I think that they reference in the in the workshop, but I'm not sure, because I don't necessarily see this through. I can't really speak to a white person's experience because I don't necessarily live and work through the world in that way. So it's a little bit difficult for me.
Mhm.
But to everybody, here is a link to the workshop. And it's at the YWCA for Metro St. Louis, and it's empowering. It's through the YMCA's brand says eliminating racism and empowering women, which is amazing because there aren't so many organizations and moments in talking about empowering women. But another part of the collage is this collage, the wet wagon wheels, was made at mostly through the like shutdown, lockdown, whatever, quarantine. Like I quarantined hardcore. Like I didn't leave the house for like 6 weeks at one time. I was just like, I ain't stepping outside. I'm not walking outside. I don't want to be around people. Nothing. I was just so scared.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would like cook a salad. I would like prepare a salad, and then I would like watch 5 episodes of a TV show or whatever. Or I would, if it was Tuesday, there was a show called Mrs. America. It talks about the Schlafly family.
Mhm.
You want to be anti-racist, you better stop buying Schlafly beer. You better stop shopping at Schnucks.
I have not seen that yet.
Well, better be careful.
We're getting a question here. Eddie from CAM is saying, do you find that an unplanned dialogue occurring between the works in your show and the works next door in Tim Portlock's show?
Say that again.
Are you finding an unplanned dialogue occurring between the works in your show and the works in Tim's show?
There's an unplanned dialogue between, I mean, I think that the dialogue was chosen by Chris, Jose, and Amanda. I think they very well knew what they were doing and why they chose us 3 for the show, because I think Rachel's work may be this very hipster, performative, movement, gestural experience, but Rachel and I's work is very similar, even though I'm not, like my whole gallery is not one work. It's made up of series of works, but also Rachel's, like, there's issues of race and class and spirituality and oppression and violence occurring in my work, that's in Rachel's work, that's in Tim's work. Like, we're all working in dialogue with each other, which is really important.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's like kind of unforeseen that during this kind of COVID era, each of your exhibitions has really gained even greater depth and importance with what's happening now, you know, with your work looking at racial injustice and systemic racism in this country, which everyone is thinking about now, I think, and I hope. Tim Portlock similarly thinking about thinking about the housing market collapse, but how that's occurring still now through, like, you know, having to evacuate your apartment, not being able to pay your rent. And then Rachel is thinking about what it means to gather together right now. That's actually a really dangerous thing. Their exhibition is called Gather, and gathering is not a safe thing to do right now. So I think our jurors did an amazing job selecting all 3 of you, because all of you are so kind of on the pulse of what's happening right now in our society and kind of reflecting that in your work. And so I very much appreciate their selection, appreciate all of you. I'm trying to see if there's a couple other questions. We've got
one question.
Yeah, we've got one asking what's next for you after this. I'm sure you've got a lot on your plate.
Yeah, I mean, this show opened and I have other projects opening and things happening, which is great. I am working on a commission for the Cincinnati Contemporary Art Center. I did a work earlier this year, but the second part of the my relationship with them will be installed in the coming, like in the next few months. I redesigned their whole lobby's carpet.
Oh, yes.
So the carpet will be manufactured and installed in the next few months. I am working on a possible solo exhibition in Milan, or a 2-person show in Milan with a good friend of mine. I am renovating my home and my studio right as we speak. So my home studio will look different, but I'm also working on purchasing an 8,000 square foot warehouse that will be my new studio. So I have my own gas kiln, my own electric kiln. I don't know if you can see, there's like a big pile of crates behind me that are 20 some odd sculptures that need to be finished. And I'm in another exhibition at the Whitney, a collections exhibition about works on paper. The museum just acquired an 8-foot print for the prints and drawings collection, but the title of the show is, hold on, I'm gonna find it because they just announced the fall in 2020 and 2022 exhibitions. So I'm really excited about this show because it's called Nothing Is So Humble, Prints from Everyday Objects. And it's Ruth Asawa, myself, and some other amazing women artists. So Julia Phillips is in the show. So I'm just like, wow, you know, such a context
That's so cool.
to be seen and to be understood. And
Yeah, that's great.
yeah, I think what else? I'm starting to be a caregiver for someone that I love dearly in my life. And what's next, I think, is just like a kind of getting into a new rhythm of my life, and with a studio at this certain scale, excited to order 5,000 pounds of clay and get my hands back working into some new sculptures.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I might be taking on an assistant to work for me and work with me in the studio. So
I'm sure that will be a big help. You can do even more than what you've been doing.
I'm just trying to find somebody who can do the work and I don't have to necessarily teach them so much. So it's a tough balance, but I think I'm going to start with, and I'm in a group show at the Masmoka and a group show at the High Museum, which is amazing, but I'm still waiting for my big gallery to come through. I'm still waiting for my first museum commission exhibition. So, and I'm preparing for my next solo exhibition in New York City in 2021.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
amazing. You should be proud of all the accomplishments.
It's rolling in.
Yeah.
Working.
Well, I think that I'm just checking the chat here. I think that we are at our time.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming.
I want to thank you, Kahlil, so much for taking the time and energy. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And if you haven't seen the show at CAM, it's open until February of next year, so you have lots of time to visit. And until then, just take care of yourselves and have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah, have a good weekend.
Yeah, it's Friday.
It's the last warm weekend before it gets so cold.
I know.
Oh.
Thank you.
Everybody, be in touch.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.